Welcome to San Joaquin Spotlight, a public affairs program featuring conversations about life in the central San Joaquin Valley. This program is brought to you in partnership between KFSR 90.7 FM and CMAC Fresno. I'm your host, Sevag Tateosian. Today we welcome back James Caples with Benaddiction. Now, the first time he was on the program, he was only on the radio version of San Joaquin Spotlight a couple of years ago, but now he's back, and now you've added a little restaurant to the mix. James, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So, since we last talked, let's talk about when we last talked first. Your truck was just up and running. We were all excited. You had some delicious food.
Thank you.
Talk about what happened. How did that go, and how's that going?
Well, it was good. You know, it started out a little rough, like any new business does. At the time, we were probably the fifth or sixth, nicer end food truck in the area. So, people were still getting used to the idea of food trucks. They were still getting used to the idea of, nicer food on food trucks. And we took probably a few months to really kind of get people used to the idea of coming out to these events. And it really took off pretty quickly, really well. I think within a few months, a few more trucks had popped up on the road, and the events were packed with people at Gazebo Gardens. Well, we didn't start Gazebo Gardens for about another year, but at Bella Fruta and at some of the other events that we did, the Thursday card hop and things like that.
Yeah, and I remember, when you first started, and you still have it, but the cool names, you've got some cool names to go with the food items. Talk about how the names come up, because, I had a rock and roll something the other day.
Yeah, the names are all songs with the exception of our Bacon, Eggs, Benedict is called the Clapton, because it started out, they were all going to be musicians, and by the time I changed it, the Clapton had already shown up on a couple of things around the city, so I decided to leave that one as it was. But everything else is a song. They all have a different reason for why I named it what I named it, and there are a lot more of them than there used to be. I mean, when we just started the truck, I think there were 8 items that we sold, and by the time we opened the restaurant a year ago, we were up to, I think, 30.
Wow.
And, we used to, when there were 8 or 9, we would run a contest that we'd give you a free T-shirt if you could name all the bands that went with all the songs. And it just got to this point where that's impossible. Even I look at it sometimes and it's like, who sings that song? Sometimes I can't even remember why I named them what I named them.
A lot of people come to me and say they have a great dish and they want to open a restaurant. It's not that easy, right? I mean, just because you can cook well, that's important, but it's not all of it.
Yeah, no, it's, I like to say, if you can cook one dish really, really well, good for you. When you can cook at least a handful of dishes really, really well, you should look at developing a menu. And, when you really want to look at opening a restaurant is after you've owned a food truck for a couple of years, built yourself a social media presence, some people in Fresno know your name, and you've actually saved a little bit of money. That last part's really, really important and really the hardest part to do.
So you had the truck, and you still have the truck.
Yeah.
Do you still go to some of the places as often as you used to?
No, right now we're taking the luxury of having the restaurant a little for granted, and we're taking off the July for the most part. We're going to a few things here and there. We're at Tioga Sequoia's Brewery a few nights a month, and we're doing the home show this coming weekend at the fairgrounds. And then we're going to do, I think we have a couple of winery events and a couple more Tioga Sequoias in August before we start probably going back to our full schedule in September.
So how did the truck develop into the restaurant? Because, you've got similar names, you've got the atmosphere in the restaurant is very similar to the atmosphere on the truck. So what happened that got you to say, you know what, I'm going to open a restaurant?
Luck and happenstance. I was at an event at Gazebo Gardens. We were doing our normal Friday night, and somebody offered me the opportunity to go to a food truck event in San Francisco that's like a regular recurring event. And I just had, my son was not much, he's probably about a year old, and or not quite a year old. And there was no way that I was going to be gone a few days a week to go move to San Francisco. And then like an hour later, this other guy offers me this restaurant space in Northwest Fresno for a very reasonable rate that, when I worked out the math, made it not very different than the commissary fees that I was paying before. And I laughed and said, no, there's no way I'm ever opening a restaurant. I've worked restaurants for years. I hated running restaurants. They're busy all the time. You're always driving yourself nuts. You never have any money if you own it yourself. And, the big corporations is the only way you're going to have money, and who wants to work there? And I went home, and I was very, ego-filled from having those two such great compliments in a day. And I went in and talked to my wife, and I said, hey, these two amazing things happened. They invited me to San Francisco, which obviously I can't do. And, this guy was talking to me about a restaurant space that, I'm not at all interested in doing. But, it's great that, people think our food is good enough that these real estate agents are coming and saying, hey, what do you think of this? And she kind of looked at me a little sideways, and she goes, well, I get why we're not talking about San Francisco, because I'd kill you. But why aren't we talking about the restaurant? I said, well, A, we don't have any money. And B, do you really want me to go back to owning a restaurant? It's running them is a lot of hours. I'd never be home with the kids. She said, well, and C was, the last time I mentioned the word restaurant, you threatened to divorce me. And she decided that we should talk about it, so we talked with my parents about it. The minute my mother heard somebody offered us a restaurant, it was we were opening a restaurant. That was it. There wasn't question anymore. The only question was how. And then another family member offered to help us with some of the cost and help get some of the stuff rolling in the right direction. And yeah, we decided to say yes, which is yet to be seen whether it's the best idea I ever had or the worst.
I was there, and I came, and I had some nachos. We're going to show, by the way, we're going to show some pictures of the food that you offer at the restaurant. But I had some nachos, and it was very creative what you had done, because they weren't your typical nachos. I think you made the chips yourself at the restaurant. Yeah. So how did you come up with that dish?
It was kind of a necessity. We were planning on doing dinner as well when we first opened the restaurant. For the first month, we did breakfast, lunch, and dinner 7 days a week, and that was a horrible idea. But because we were going to be open for dinner, I wanted to have a few appetizer options on the menu. And because I was going for a American diner, but in a much more modern feel with the menu, I wanted to do a couple of classical kind of things that you see in most American restaurants. So nachos went on the menu, buffalo wings went on the menu. We do a bruschetta that we're probably not going to be doing for much longer because it's the least selling thing on the menu. And yeah.
You said something in this conversation. Actually, you said a lot of great things, but the hours of operation. I mean, how do you go with the hours of operation? How do you say, you know what, we want to be open at this time, or we should be open at this time? Because, it's a restaurant. You can be open from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. and you'll have people coming.
You can be open whenever you want to be open. And that was honestly one of the main reasons why when we decided to do the restaurant, was we were making a good amount of sales at every stop we went to with the truck. We were running out of food a few days a week. And the main problem with us being able to make money off of the food truck was the fact that we could only go out and sell a few days a week. There were only so many events that you can go to. And the county of Fresno makes it really, a mixture of the county and the city and all sorts of other issues make it very difficult for you to start new food truck events in the area. And owning the restaurant gave us the ability to sell whenever we wanted. If we wanted to be open, and the original plan was 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day. And I did that for a month, and what we learned was when your logo is a fried egg and a piece of bacon, people don't automatically think of you for dinner.
Interesting.
So mix that with the fact that we don't have a liquor license of any kind. We don't do any alcohol. And we just weren't pulling a dinner crowd. And when I looked at the labor dollars that we were spending to be open for dinner and the amount of sales that we were bringing in, we just realized that the amount of extra sales we would have to be doing at dinner to run that shift was a unrealistic goal, for the trade-off being I was never going to see my kids. So we decided that we could cut the labor, cut off ourselves at 3 o'clock and do breakfast and lunch, and I get to see my kids most nights a week.
And then the other thing you mentioned is menu items that don't do well. Mm-hmm. That's got to be tough for you to say, this is not doing well, but I love this dish.
Oh, not at all. I am more than happy to look at my menu and circle things and be like, I would love to get rid of this. I would love to get rid of, like, my cooks laugh at me. I have one in the kitchen that's like our menu front and back. and I draw over it and I cross something out and I'll erase it and I'll put it back and then I'll cross something else out and decide to replace it. And I've been in the process of printing a new menu that's revamped for the last 2 months. And every time I think I'm going to send it to press, I change my mind on something and I go back to change one of the menu items somehow to either just increase its appeal or sometimes just because I hate making it the way it is and I want to make it differently.
Tell us a little bit about one of the first dishes that you have, which is bits of French toast.
The tributes. They're called Tributes, the greatest French toast in the world. It's a reference to a Tenacious D song, which is Jack Black's band. And that song is a tribute to the greatest song in the world. It's not actually the greatest song in the world. So that's the joke with the French toast is my favorite French toast that I've ever had was at this little restaurant in Baltimore when my sister lived there. And it was a frosted flake crusted French toast that's grilled. And like they didn't really crush them up as much as we do with what we put on ours. But I wanted to do something that was the similar concept, but me. So we take Hawaiian sweet rolls and we cut them up into balls, and then we dredge them in French toast batter and toss them in graham cracker crumbs and we deep fry them. Wow. And then we powder them with powdered sugar. So they're like a mix between like French toast and a beignet.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you obviously have put a lot of thought into this dish. I mean, how do you know when to stop adding things and when? I mean, it's got to be tough because you could always say, oh, why don't we throw a little this on there and a little that on there?
Yeah, my line cooks would tell you I don't. Everything is in a constant, there's certain things, like I stopped messing with my hollandaise sauce a long time ago. I know what it is what it is, like if I could play with it all the time if I wanted to. And every once in a while I get a bug and I decide that I'm going to, make a different sauce, and I'll either tweak the hollandaise to make this other sauce that I want to make, or I'll just create a new sauce altogether. I do that a lot. One of our new ones is called apple bacon butter. And that's actually something I made a long time ago. And I decided to finally start putting it on a sandwich that's going to be called the Diamonds on the Soles of Her Shoes. And it's a chicken Waldorf. So we take our shredded chicken, we add some hollandaise and the apple bacon butter and some Granny Smith apples and bacon, and we put it on a croissant with lettuce and tomato and a little bit more hollandaise and apple bacon butter.
Wow, that sounds delicious.
Yeah, it's summertime. We wanted I wanted to do some cold sandwiches. Everything we have is hot, so.
You talked earlier about social media and how it's important to have a presence in social media. Talk a little bit about that some more. I mean, social media is, end this sentence, social media is blank.
Oh, the bane of my existence. Social media is extremely important, and yet it's the easiest thing ever to neglect. I actively see that if I am good, especially on Instagram, people love Instagram these days. And the thing is, like, I have never been a photo taker in my entire life. My wife takes photos, my mom, dad, everybody else takes photos. The idea of getting out a camera taking, I just never remembered to do it. I went to DC a couple weeks ago, and my wife had some meetings, and I was walking around museums with my kids, and it was like the end of the day, and I realized I'd only taken like 3 photos the entire day. And I'm like, oh,
should have taken more photos.
Yeah, but Instagram, I put something on Instagram, and I see a boost in business almost every single time. If I'm consistent about Instagram, I see my business continue to see its results. Twitter a little bit, Facebook a little bit, but Instagram,
huh?
Yeah. And I think it's the best way to reach millennials, I think, social media. I advertise on the radio. I do New Rock 104 and Kino on AM. And people ask, oh, why aren't you doing a radio station to try and contact millennials? But, the younger millennials in particular, they don't listen to the radio. They listen to Spotify and they listen to Pandora or whatever new one exists that I've never heard of before. And, but Instagram, they're all on Instagram. Everybody's on Instagram these days, except for other than my business, me. And, it's vitally important. And that's, I kind of said that in passing, but, if you're going to open a restaurant, I'm not at all joking. Opening a food truck first it's never, well, not never. It may at some point in Fresno get to a point where you can really turn a good living off of just a food truck. But just owning a food truck, it is not a good way to make a living in Fresno right now. but it is a great way to start a restaurant because you give yourself the ability to learn who your clientele is and learn a bunch of things that you're never going to know until you're out there doing it. You know, my business plan, when I first opened the truck, I go back and I read it from time to time. And my target clientele was, you know, like 18 to 30, you know, younger people who love food trucks in every other city in the country. My best clientele is baby boomers.
Wow.
I,
Interesting.
I have more baby boomers in my restaurant than anybody else. And it's really probably a tie between, you know, older and younger than that. You know, it's, you know, part of that is where we're at, which was an intentional decision. I knew that there were a lot of, you know, my key demographic from the food truck in that area. And it wasn't an area of Fresno that the food trucks were going, so I wouldn't be poaching my business off of my food truck events.
Yeah. Talk about the next item we're going to show is this tuna fish sandwich.
Oh yeah, that's another result of my, I wanted more cold items. Oh, this one's actually hot. It's called the Sellout, which is a Real Big Fish song. And it's basically our fat bottom grilled cheese, which I think you're going to show too. It's got 5 different kinds of cheese that we put in and on it. So it's got a little crust of cheese on the outside. And then we put our own tuna that we make in the restaurant. It's got some celery, some onion, a little bit of our hollandaise, some lemon and dill, and some bacon and avocado. And we press it all together and start cut it in half.
Wow, sounds delicious.
Oh yeah, served with side fries. Onion rings are $1 more, but we do make a hand-breaded onion ring in the restaurant too.
And so are you ever afraid someone's going to steal your recipe? Because, you know, I know a lot of people that have great recipes, but they're hesitant because, you know, oh, don't say that too loud. Or when I cook stuff and people ask me what's in it, I always tell them, oh, this is this. And
Yeah.
people always say, oh, they're going to steal and open a restaurant with your recipe. Are you always worried at all that someone is going to steal your recipe?
No. I could tell you, even if I told you the exact amounts of everything that I put in one of my dishes, there's just a certain way that things get done that things come out a little bit differently. You know, I mean, I've had friends come over to our house and eaten the food that I'll make something from the restaurant in the house and like it tastes different. I was like, well, you know, it's not made on this giant griddle that we use for everything every day, you know, like it's different temperature control. I mean, the pan that you make something in makes a difference, you know, when it really comes down to, you know, how your food comes out in the end. That's why when people say, oh, you know, I mean, and the other thing is, you know, I'll get people who tell me sometimes, like, oh yeah, I tried making hollandaise sauce one time, but it just came out terribly. And I'm like, you know, I tried making hollandaise sauce one time and it came out terribly too. I've probably tried making hollandaise sauce 100 times and it came out terribly. But you know, I didn't. Well, nowadays I can occasionally like put my mind to something, and the first time I make it, I'm like, this is amazing. But I mean, by the time you're eating my food, I've made that 100 times.
Well, and
I probably didn't like it half of them.
so practice is what you're saying. And
Exactly.
if you have a special dish, keep practicing. How do you know when something is good? I mean, let's say I'm cooking something and I'm saying, oh, this is the best thing I've ever had.
Yeah.
And then you're not sure to feed someone that. So, like we do that all the time where I make certain things very good, but when people come over, I don't pull the trigger. I don't make it.
Yeah.
Advice? Any comments?
I'm like the most self-conscious person ever. And I will tell you right now, the first 4, maybe 5 5-star reviews I got on Yelp when we first opened the restaurant, I would have sworn up and down that people were just being nice, that people were like just letting us slide on things. There's no way people think we're this good. I mean, like right now, I figured out the other day, or somebody told me the other day, that if you search Fresno area on Yelp and search breakfast and brunch by rating, we're number 1.
Congratulations on that.
But I still look at it, I'm like, no way. You know, like there are better, maybe there aren't, but you know, like it's a self-consciousness thing. And I just got over it at some point. I mean, there are still things that sometimes I'll make them and I'm like, I might be able to make this better. and that's what we were talking about. Like I'm a tinkerer. Like I like to play with things, and I make up a new sandwich like every 4 days. My cooks hate me for it. And we just painted one of our walls in the restaurant. We did a top coat of chalkboard paint, so I can just draw on the walls now. And like I just started putting things up. That's where the tuna sandwich. Like I was like, well, we just put out a specials menu. I don't want to change the specials menu. And I wrote specials on the wall, and I just started writing new sandwiches on the wall. And I'm pretty sure one of them is going to end up quitting. But
You know,
it's good time.
we showed the tuna fish and you talked about the grilled cheese a little bit, but let's go to the grilled cheese a little bit more. So You've got this grilled cheese, and we're going to show it as people are listening to you talk. Why should we come have the grilled cheese at your place?
The fat bottom grilled cheese will change your life. I'm not even joking on that. It was originally going to be called the stick sandwich when we were naming things after food or after bands instead of after songs, and it is responsible for everything being named after songs. Because my friend Kara ate it, and she was like, "Why are you calling this the stick sandwich?" And I said, "Because nothing's cheesier than sticks." She goes, "James, this is the fat bottom grilled cheese." 'Cause she's a huge Queen fan. I was like, "You're right. Best name ever." And I mean, it's Gruyere, Gouda, Jarlsberg, fresh mozzarella, cheddar, and Parmesan.
Wow, all those
And
cheeses.
all of them, we shred them all together. It took me like 10 different blends of cheese to come up with that blend of cheese and the right proportions and everything. And we put a little seasoning in it. You can add ham, bacon, egg, avocado, tomato, and it's just a great sandwich. The crust on the outside gives it like a crispiness that gives it extra texture. I'm a big fan with tomato and bacon, I think is great. Or if you're in the morning and you just feel like being gluttonous, getting it with a fried egg and bacon makes like the most amazing, awful for you breakfast sandwich ever. Or on Fridays, we do Fat Kid Fridays is one of our two hashtags we have Fit Friday and Fat Kid Friday. It's called the Heartbreaker, and it's the fat bottom grilled cheese with pulled pork, bacon, ham, a fried egg, hollandaise sauce, and barbecue sauce.
Wow, it's a pretty big
It's
sandwich.
that with fries for $8.
Wow. We're running out of time. I mean, I can talk to you for hours and hours about this stuff,
Yeah,
but
I'm chatty.
but you're providing some great information and insight about the restaurant business. Prices. How do you determine what to charge? Because some people, if something is expensive, it turns me off. Now, I'm not saying your restaurant's expensive, but there are times where my wife and I will go out somewhere and we'll get something simple, and the bill will be like $50, $60, and I'm like, whoa, what happened here?
Yeah.
How do you?
Well, Fresno's in a tough spot. The issue that we have as restaurant owners in Fresno is that corporate restaurants are so prevalent here. There's so many, and they're able to serve you food extremely cheap for a couple of reasons. One, because they're buying it in extreme bulk because it's part of their corporation, so they have these great contracts and they carry things cheaper. And partially because they have so many outlets to spread that cost out to that they don't have to profit as much off of one entity. So if one restaurant's not making a profit, a lot of the times it's perfectly fine for them because they've got 300 other ones that are.
Whereas you're relying on this.
Exactly. So we don't have, I have a 1,000 square foot restaurant with 24 seats. I don't have a freezer. I don't have a microwave. We do everything fresh. Problem is, that is a lot more expensive than serving you what they serve you. IHOP or Denny's or whatever, they get these giant 50-pound sacks of pancake mix that you add, depending on which one you're buying, either milk or water, occasionally milk and eggs if you're at a restaurant that's buying the fancy one. But our pancake batter uses two different types of flours, sugar, butter, eggs, and eggs, when I first opened the truck, eggs cost 9 cents a piece.
Wow.
They're up to 23.
That's over double your
Yeah,
cost.
exactly. I mean, and there are times where, if I wanted to be the kind of person who stuck to my guns and said, I'm only getting fresh, local, organic, I'd be paying 50 cents an egg. And, the thing is we don't have the ability to raise our prices with costs. So costing becomes extremely important when you open. When I opened, I was being really modest on my pricing. I knew Fresnans weren't going to want to pay a lot. And I priced most of my food at about 35. Some of it as much as 40% for the food items that were a little bit more expensive. And industry standard, for the corporate restaurants is usually about 20, 25. And, I think you ask the bigger name chefs, they'll tell you about 30, 33. And, so I went a little high on the cost because I didn't want to turn people away. I still get told constantly that we're too expensive. And, it's a difficult thing to balance, but, we've got line cooks who have to get paid. We've got, I've got a sous chef who has to get paid, dishwashers, servers. And, if you're not busy all the time, that can be difficult.
So you're not pricing your products to a point where you're out there gouging people. I mean,
No.
you're
No, and there are some items that, these days, because of the way price has risen since I priced it, those items that were 35% are now more like 40. Those items that were 45%, or 45% are now running more towards 50. And, every time that runs in, everybody else still has to get paid. So the only person that's not, making that money in the tail end is me. So, that's, it's important. I'm probably gonna get myself in a lot of trouble with presidents on this, but I actually, as a business owner, am a supporter of raising the minimum wage, because I think that doing that, it's gonna cost me more money, but at the same time, it gives me a little bit of a leadway to say, okay, now I need to raise my prices a little bit to go along with that. And, I think it would really help business owners be able to kind of rebalance out our economy the way it should be.
Well, James, we're almost out of time. Your opportunity, tell people where they can find more information about your restaurant and where you're located.
BenedictionTruck.com. The restaurant's at 3015 West Bullard, southwest corner of Bullard and Marks.
Thank you for coming on the program this week.
It's really small, don't miss it.
That's all for this edition of San Joaquin Spotlight. To the volunteer crew that made this production and every production possible, we couldn't do it without you. Thank you to our guest this week, James Caples. James is the owner of the Benaddiction Food Truck and Restaurant, both now.
That's
Delicious food, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you to the audience members watching this broadcast and listening to this broadcast. We hope that you enjoy this publication this week and every week. We try to bring you the latest guests from the Fresno area. And, with James, he's here talking about the restaurant business. Just opened the restaurant about a year ago.
Yesterday was our 1-year anniversary.
Congratulations on
Thanks.
that. I'm your host, Sevag Tateosian. Tune in next week to a new edition